Hare Krishna, and welcome again to our evening katha. We hope that all of you are well and safe and continuing to try to increase your Krishna consciousness in this very strange period. Today we're going to discuss about one of my favorite personalities, Srila Narottam Das Thakur Mahashai. So he was one of the most important personalities in the second generation of Vaishnavacharyas, and he had a lot of influence, and especially his songs. Prabhupada himself said he was very fond of Narottam songs, and he said Narottam songs are non-different from the Vedas. Very sweet songs, but very powerful message and very deep meaning is kept there. So one of my favorite songs of his was Gauranga Bolite Have. So we'll start off our program with that song. Gauranga Bolite Have Pulaka Sharir Hari Hari Bolite Nai Yane Bhaveni Gauranga Bolite Have Pulaka Sharir Hari Hari Bolite Nai Yane Bhaveni Arkabeni Taichan Karuna Hoibe Samsara Basana Mora Kabe Tuchahave Arkabe Nitai Chan Karuna Hoibe Samsara Basana Mor Kabe Tuchahave Visaya Chariya Kabe Shura Habe Mana Kabe Hama Heraba Sri Vrindavana Visaya Chariya Kabe Shura Habe Mana Kabe Hama Heraba Sri Vrindavana Rupa Raghunatha Pade Hoibe Akuti Kabihama Bujabase Jugala Piriti Rupa Raghunatha Pade Hoibe Akuti Kabihama Bujabase Jugala Piriti Nata Pade Raja Sadana Koroye Sada Narotamoda Gauranga Bolite Have Pulaka Sharir Hari Hari Bolite Nai Yane Bhaveni Gauranga Bolite Have Pulaka Sharir Hari Hari Bolite Nai Yane Bhaveni. Gauranga Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. So again, we'd like to welcome you after a gap to our evening katha. We have great hope that all of you are fine. You're increasing your Krishna consciousness in this very strange time. So today we're going to discuss about Srila Narottam Das Thakur, who was one of the most important personalities in the second generation of Vaishnava Acharyas. In fact, Narottam is so important that even before his appearance, Sriman Mahaprabhu mentions him twice. One time in Navadvip, Mahaprabhu told Lokanath Goswami to go with Bhugarbha to Vrindavan and start the excavation or finding of the holy places of Krishna's pastimes that were lost. So he started even before Rupa and Sanatana and others. And he told them that eventually my great devotee Narottam will come and you give him initiation. So one time. Second time, Mahaprabhu was going to supposedly to Vrindavan, but instead of going east, or rather west, he went north to Bengal. So many acharyas believe actually he went to save Rupa and Sanatan. He wasn't actually going to Vrindavan at that time, because he would have had to due west. So, but he was going along the road with millions and, not millions, but thousands of followers, people were following him. So after he delivered Rupa and Sanatan, Rupa Goswami told him, this is not the proper way to go to Vrindavan. After all, there's no MBT guest house, there's no Krishna Balaram guest house, there's nothing there. What will you do? So Mahaprabhu considered this within his heart. When he reached Kanai Natshala, he decided to turn around and return back to Puri. But at Kanai Natshala, which is on the bank of the Padma River, which is a branch of the Ganga, Mahaprabhu was having kirtan. Suddenly he began to shout out, Narottam, 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 Narottam. Now, Nityananda Prabhu had seen this before. This is not the first time this happened. But this time Mahaprabhu was completely beside himself with ecstasy, chanting the name of Narottam. Narottam means the topmost human being. So he could understand some special personality must be there. So after the kirtan, Nityananda Prabhu said, what is it that you were calling out Narottam, Narottam like this? He said, Nityananda, on the other side of this river of Padma Nadi, in what is now known as Bangladesh and Kaituri, my great devotee Narottam will appear. So remembering him, I was singing like this. And tomorrow, I will deposit my store of Gauranga Prem, Gaur Prem, in this Padma Nadi for her to deliver to him when the time comes. So the next day there was big kirtan on the bank of the Padma River, and Mahaprabhu was dancing in ecstasy. After kirtan, he entered with all the devotees. They went to take bath in the river. As soon as he entered into the river, all her hairs began to stand on end in the form of little waves, and she overflowed her banks. Suddenly the Padma River personified appeared and said, what service you have for me, my Lord? He said, very soon my great devotee Narottam will come. Till then I am depositing my Gaur Prem in this river, in your waters. When he comes, you deliver it to him. He said, but my Lord, how will I recognize? When someone enters your waters and you overflow your banks and your hair stand on end in the form of little waves, that is Narottam. And the chief took her watery form again and back into the river. And then Lord told Nityananda that you will have to return here and bring Narottam to the river. So this was second time that Mahaprabhu mentioned Narottam. So it came to pass that in Kaituri there was a king named Krishnananda. And he was a Kayasta, which at that time in Bengali society was a Shudra. Somehow he was a Shudra king. And he had a very chaste wife named Narayani. And on the Magh Purnima day, they gave birth to a very beautiful child who was blackish, darkish in complexion. And they were everyone was very joyful in the kingdom. Now the king had a heir to his throne. So Later, several months later, when they began to perform the Annaprashan ceremony, where the first grains are given to the child, everybody came with the grains, and Narottam, he just turned his face, he just made the most horrible face, and wouldn't accept the grains. And the king was very anxious. Suddenly, one old Vaishnava appeared on the scene. He understood, and he brought some Vishnu Prasad, and he offered to the child, and the child ate very heartily. Then everyone noted this character of this child, that he was refusing because it wasn't offered to Krishna. Gradually he grew, and he became one of the best students in his class. But he wasn't interested in playing like other children. He learned all of he was very anxious to learn all the scriptures and know all these things. But his favorite activity, there was an old Vaishnava named Krishnadas who sat in the temple, the palace temple, and used to recite the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he would sit with Krishnadas and listen to these things, and he decided to dedicate himself to the lotus feet of the Lord. So one day it came to pass that while he was sleeping, he got a dream. In that dream, Lord Nityananda appeared before him. His hair were standing on end. He had never seen anyone so beautiful, shining golden form. And Lord Nityananda said, tomorrow you have to go to bathe in the Padma river. And there the Lord has deposited his Gaur Prem. The Padma Nadi will deliver it to you. So next morning when he woke up, he was so shocked. And he remembered Lord Nityananda's instructions. He went down to the Nadi, to the river. As he entered the waters, the Padma river began to overflow her banks, and all her hairs were standing on end in the form of little waves. Then she understood, this is Narottam. And she delivered that Gaur Prem. At that time he saw a golden divinity swoop him up in his arms and embrace him. In fact, it felt like he was merging into that personality, and he was just in total ecstasy. He couldn't see or hear anything. In fact, his blackish complexion turned golden after being embraced by that golden personality. Then he was just lying on the banks of the river and just chanting and bawling, crying and weeping like anything. Meanwhile, King Krishnananda, he didn't see Narottam at the palace, and they went to his room. He wasn't in his room. They sent the guards everywhere. Finally they found this golden child on the banks of the river just chanting the holy name in ecstasy. And they were totally shocked. And they brought him back to the palace, and he went to the temple kirtan hall and began to dance and dance. They said, Narottam, what's happened? Oh, Naru, what happened to you? He said, today when I went to bathe, a golden divinity appeared and embraced me and filled me with Krishna Prem. So I've decided to devote myself to serving the lotus feet of the Lord. This was a great shock for the king, because he was hoping that Narottam would inherit the kingdom. Every king thinks that his son is going to inherit the kingdom. And that ghat became known as Prem Tali Ghat. And pilgrims still bathe there when they visit Kaituri. So he went to the kirtan hall and began to dance and chant like anything. Then they knew he's going to sneak away anyway, anyhow. They put simply you catch a fox and kill it and cook it, and this will cure. Narottam began to laugh. He said, what is this? Killing animals is a sin, and this will not make me better, this will make me worse, because I'm suffering from the disease of love of Godhead, and there's no cure for this disease. Please let me go to Vrindavan. Now they were even more careful. They were watching him, guards were watching him day and night. Gradually the fame of Narottam, every day he would sit and chant and speak about the Lord's pastimes. And his fame began to spread far and wide. And people used to come and see him. So even the news got to the Muslim ruler who was called Jai Girdhar. So he was also anxious to get darshan of this child. So he ordered King Krishnananda that you bring this child to my court. Now Krishnananda was in big trouble. He knows if he takes him outside the house, he'll seek any opportunity to run, but still the Jaigirdar is the governor. He has to follow his orders. So he kept the guards informed them very carefully, but still with a little bit of inattention, Narottam saw his chance and he ran into the forest. And he avoided all the main roads and went by all the back roads to the forest. Of course, he was a king's son, prince. He's used to soft life. Running through the forest, his feet became blistered. He was growing thin, hardly getting anything to eat. Somewhere in the Jharkhand forest, he just swooned out of weakness. And then a golden Brahmin came and said, "Here, take this milk, drink deeply, and you will be relieved." And so then he woke up, he took that milk, and he fell asleep again. And then Rup Sanatan came and said, "Quick, hurry to Vrindavan. The Lord in the form of a golden Brahmin has given you darshan." When he woke up, he was so shocked. "I saw the Lord personally, but I didn't recognize him." He was even more determined. But one party of the king, because he'd sent everyone everywhere, even to Navadvip, and that's specifically Narottam had avoided going to Navadvip because he knew that would be the first place they would look for him. Srinivas and others had gone there first, but Narottam went straight to Vrindavan. But one party of the king's men were very efficient. They caught him. So he told them, said, "Look, in our society, when the husband dies, the wife will enter into the fire along with her husband. Naturally, the relatives will try to stop her, but she would be less than chaste if she did not follow her husband on the funeral pyre. The same way, I am going into the fire of Krishna consciousness. I would be less than chaste if I did not continue in to surrender my life to my Lord." Hearing this heart-rending example, the king's men, they couldn't hold him. In fact, one of them gave him money to continue his journey. So finally, he reached to Visramghat. He reached to Mathura and he came to Visramghat, took his bath, and in the evening he met an old Brahmin who was very happy to meet him and brought him to his house, invited him to his house to stay. In that Brahmin's house, he learned that Rup, Sanatan, everyone had already left this world. Kashinath and everyone had already left this world. His sorrow knows no description. No description for his sorrow. But Jiva Goswami was still there, he heard. So he was hopeful. But that night, in a spiritual vision, all the personalities that he wanted to see came to him. In fact, that old Brahmin was able to hear the conversations. He was sleeping in the next room, and he heard the conversations. They all encouraged him, "Please go to Vrindavan. There's a lot of work for you to do." So then he went to Vrindavan and came to the Govindadev temple. And seeing the beautiful deity of Govindadev, the deity of Rupa Goswami, he immediately swooned again, fell flat onto the floor. Immediately someone informed Rupa Goswami. Rupa came running there. And all the great devotees of Vrindavan came. And they, "Where is Narottam? Where is Narottam?" Because in a dream, Lord had told Rupa that Narottam is coming tomorrow. Not Rupa. Jiva Goswami. Somebody informed Jiva Goswami. And then they saw this young fellow sprawled out in front of the Lord on the floor in complete trance of ecstasy. They said, "That is Narottam." So then Lokanath had also come. Lokanath invited him, "Please come, take prasad with me." So in this way, he was eating with Lokanath, but he was feeling, "I'm so fallen, how I can eat with this great personality? I'm not even fit to be the dust of your feet." And Lokanath comforted him and said, No, this is fine. And he said, "Lord has instructed me to accept you as my spiritual master." And Lokanath said, "Ha. When you have the Lord as your own spiritual master, why do you want another ordinary spiritual master like me. He said, no, this is a system. Although I have mercy of the Lord, still I must follow the system. So then Lokanath said, well, look, the scriptures say that one should, the guru should study the disciple, and the disciple should study the guru for 1 year. So it went on like that he went to the school of Jiva Goswami, but every day he would come to Lokanath and hear also from Lokanath and try to seek ways to serve him. But Lokanath was so humble, he wouldn't let him do any service. So he was trying to figure out what to do. So finally he began to watch the daily activities of Lokanath. And he saw that every morning he went to a certain place to do his morning duties. So Narottam got a little bucket and a broom, and every day after his guru had finished with his morning duties, he would go there with a bucket of Jamuna water and his broom and clean the place. So this went on for several months. Then Lokanath Goswami, first he thought maybe some villager doing something. But this went on for a long time. He said, what is this going on? So one day Lokanath hid in the bushes, and here came Jiva with his pail and his bucket. He said, what are you doing? And he said, you are my guru, I have to serve you, you don't allow any service, this is the only service I can find. So then Lokanath said, all right, come. So then he would sit with him while Lokanath was serving his deity, Radha Binod. And that time there was no Hira jewelers or Gopal Das Ramnivas. Just by meditation he would make beautiful ornaments for his deities, he would make beautiful crowns, he would make beautiful things, all sorts of things, just in his meditation. One time in his meditation, he put a beautiful silver umbrella over top of the throne. And he made this beautiful crown that was very big. But when he went to put the crown, the umbrella was in the way. Suddenly Narottam leaned over and tipped the umbrella out of the way. And Lokanath looked at him, because he was all doing this in his meditation, but Narottam was able to, he'd become so merged with his spiritual master, he was able to see what was going on. Then Lokanath said, all right, you go to the river, take bath, and I will initiate you. But you're the only disciple I will ever take. And so he initiated him and told him his service is boiling milk in the spiritual world. So in Narottam's meditation, sometimes one golden divinity appeared and told him, very beautiful Vaishnavi appeared and told him that my Krishna likes sweet rice too much, so you have to boil the milk under Champaka Lata. And so you boil the milk. In this way, when he came out of his meditation, he told Jiva Goswami about this, and Jiva Goswami said, yes, that Vaishnavi who appeared, that was Sri Radha herself, and she's confirmed the service that your spiritual master has given you. So anyway, in his dream, in his meditation, he would be boiling the milk. Sometimes the milk would be boiling over, so with his hands, this was all just going on with meditation, he would try to stop the milk from boiling out of the pot, and thus his hands became scalded. But somehow, that was in his siddhadeha, in his meditation, but it followed him all the way back to this material world. And when Jiva Goswami saw, he tried to hide his hands from, because he wasn't after name and fame, but Jiva Goswami grabbed his hands and asked for an explanation how this happened. When he told him, yes, that is your eternal service, boiling the milk. So Jiva Goswami, he met Srinivasacharya and Shamananda, who was Dukhi Krishnadas, but later he became Shamananda. They all became the best of friends. So after they had been studying with Jiva Goswami for quite some time, or quite proficient in the Goswami literature, Jiva gave them the duty to take all of these books to Bengal. Because they were sitting in Bengal, in Vrindavan, writing all these books and figuring out the Vaishnava, Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy, and everybody in Bengal had no idea what was going on. So they wanted to bring this Vrindavan doctrine to Bengal. So they made the first traveling Sankirtan party. Jiva Goswami had some merchants from Mathura make a special bullock cart with a place for putting a big trunk for the books, and they started off on their journey to Bengal. So our devotees making these special Dodge vans to distribute books are following exactly in the footsteps of such great personalities. So we know that somehow when they got to Banavishnupur, the king's men, he was a big dacoit, and he had many band of dacoits, they stole all the books. We can't imagine the distress when they woke up in the morning and saw the books were gone. So Srinivas decided to stay and try to find the books, and he sent Chamananda and Narottam off to Kaituri. And then Chamananda would continue on to Orissa to preach the message of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So when he got to Kaituri, it was like the people of Kaituri got their life back. They saw this great personality. They suddenly realized, this is our Naru, come back from Vrindavan. They were so happy. Everyone was overjoyed. His father by that time had disappeared. His cousin brother Santosh had become the king. And Santosh was over delighted to see Narottam. Everyone was very happy, and he began to preach amongst the Kaituri devotees, and he made many disciples, and he became very famous. So then he decided to go and visit Nabadvip and other places. So he went to Nabadvip, and he saw the house where Mahaprabhu had appeared. He met the sons of Achyutananda, he met the sons of Srivas Pandit. He saw all these holy places. We cannot imagine his ecstasy. He went on to Puri, and finally even on to Ekachakra, because it was Lord Nityananda who led him to the Padma River to get the Gaur Prem. So this was a special thing. And in Kaituri he developed a very special type of kirtan called Pujavali, which is very, of course it's sort of dying out nowadays, but this was Narottam's specialty. So when he returned to Kaituri, there was a message from Lokanath Goswami that it's very wonderful that the devotees there in Kaituri are prosecuting Krishna consciousness, but they need deity worship to advance. So most of them are householders. They will need deity worship to advance very nicely. So then Narottam began to conceive an idea in his brain that we'll have a big festival on the appearance of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because nobody had celebrated Gaur Purnima before, and we'll install all these deities in that festival. Hearing about the idea from Narottam, Santosh, who's now become Narottam's disciple and was the king, he said, my treasure house is fully yours, you do whatever you want. So they began to build a big temple hall and storage houses and residence for all the devotees. They wrote letters in perfect Sanskrit poetry to invite all the greatest Vaishnavas at the time to come. And Narottam got some deities, but he was missing one special deity. He wanted deity of Lord Chaitanya and Vishnu Priya. So one day he went to a neighboring village, and there was a very rich Brahmin there named Vipradas. But although Vipradas was very wealthy, he was living in poverty. And he came to finally know that his storehouse of grain, he had a huge storehouse of grain, but there was a huge poisonous snake, and so everyone was afraid to go inside and take the rice out of the go down, so he had no way to make any money. So Narottam fearlessly walked into the grain house, opened the door and walked in the grain house. That great snake slithered out, and Narottam came out of the grain house with these beautiful deities of Gauranga and Vishnu Priya, and he brought them back. He had 6 deities. We have a beautiful mantra that we sing every day in the Rajbhog Artik in Vrindakun, given to us by Baba Madhav Das. Gauranga Balabhikanta Sri Krishna Brajamohanam Radharaman He Radhe Radhakanta Namostute. So these were the deities, Gauranga and Vishnu Priya, Radha Balabhikanta, Gauranga Balabhikanta, Sri Krishna Radha Krishna, Brajamohan, Radha Brajamohan are here in Vrindavan, Radharaman he Radhe Radhakanta Namostate. Radhakanta. So finally all of the Vaishnavas began to come, and Acharya Rani Janavama led a big party, and they had boats to bring everyone across the river. They were ready and waiting for them with garlands and sandalwood paste. When they reached the other side, then they garlanded them and put sandalwood paste, brought them to their residences. We think we just read about these things in Mahaprabhu's pastimes. But I remember, I think it was the 30th anniversary of Bombay Temple. It was like that. Whatever train station you came, there was no boats, but there was cars there to take us, and we had residences assigned to us and devotees assigned to wherever need, and we got garlands and sandalwood paste. These things are still going on even today. So gradually all the Vaishnavas appeared, and the great day came when they were going to have the installation. So they had Srinivasacharya perform the installation according to all the rules and regulations. Wonderful installation was there. And then after the installation, in the kirtan hall there was a big kirtan. And Narottam was just waiting for this time. He started his kirtan very slowly, and gradually began to build up and build up. At the height of the kirtan in the night, suddenly Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda appeared in the kirtan, dancing like gold lightning in the black clouds. Everyone was totally astounded. It's told, every biographer, sometimes biographies they write one thing, sometimes another biographer writes another thing, sometimes something is missing from one that's found in another. But every single biography of Narottam explains that all the Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda and all his associates appeared in this kirtan. We can imagine the ecstasy of Mahajanava when she saw her husband. What did Achyuta and Govinda think when they saw Advaita dancing with Lord Chaitanya? What did Srivas Thakur's sons think when they saw him? We can imagine what was going on. People were rolling on the ground, pulling their hair. They were coming to Narottam in his ears saying, "Thank you, Lord, for bringing us, showing us our Lord." In this way, Narottam knew about this. He had a dream, so he wasn't going to let this moment go. He did kirtan late into the night. Then there was a huge feast. Then the next morning, Mahajanava came before the newly installed deities, and she took a little pail of colored powder, and threw it on the deities, and then she turned to tell all the Vaishnavas to take the pails that were supplied, and before it was even, the words were even out of her mouth, all the Vaishnavas became like little children, playing holy in remembrance of Krishna's holy pastimes with the gopis. Then the next day, Mahajanava, she began to cook a wonderful feast for all the Vaishnavas by her own hand, and she sat all the Vaishnavas down and fed them with her own hand, only till everyone was finished. We think the prasad service should be done for the bhaktas, but it should be done by most advanced devotees. It's a very serious service. And she set the example, not taking anything until every Vaishnava was satisfied. And then there was this Khetri festival, became a yearly thing, and it was very momentous moment in the Gaudiya Vaishnav history, because everyone would meet and they would discuss. And Mahajanava, as she was like the GBC chairman, she managed to resolve all the problems, because there were so many people with different ideas. Someone was speaking Gaur Paramavad, that Lord Chaitanya is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, not Krishna. Nityananda Paramavad, Advaita Param. So many different, we can't go into it here, we don't have time. But she resolved all of the differences and brought everyone together. Nowadays we just ban people. We don't like somebody's idea, we ban them. But Mahajanava, we need these people now to bring us all together, resolve all the problems. And Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy, the Vrindavan doctrine ruled supreme. Because by this time the books have been recovered by Srinivas, and even years after, they would all meet together and resolve all their differences. So then, one of the big problems was Narottam. He had many Brahmin disciples, although somehow or other he was considered a Shudra. So this became a big problem. Even Veerbhadra, Mahajanava's son, at one of the later Ketarigram festivals, he delivered such a preaching about this thing that everybody was convinced that it is by work and guna and karma, by quality and work, not by birth, that one is considered a Brahmin, and a Vaishnava is greater than a Brahmin. But anyway, this was a problem throughout Narottam's career. At one time, Raja Narasingha, whose chief pandit was Rup Narayan, all the smarta Brahmins were bugging the king that this guy is ruining our Hindu religion, you have to stop him. So they tried to, he wrote a letter that how are you doing these atrocious activities, ruining against the Vedic principles. And Narottam wrote back, very nice letter. The king was convinced, but he knew he could never convince his men, the pandits. So all the pandits went there to challenge. So Ganga Narayan and Ramchandra Kaviraj disguised themselves as potters and beetle sellers on the edge of the village, and because these things Brahmins need. So when they came, they started talking in Sanskrit, and they said the potters and the beetle seller in this village speak Sanskrit. Then they began to argue different points. Then they began to argue the point about Brahman and Vaishnava, and they were defeated. Then Rup Narayan himself came. He couldn't defeat the pot seller and the beetle seller. And the king said, even the pot seller of this village you can't defeat. What will you do when you meet? But they defeated him and said, nowadays we want to defeat someone, we just want to kick on them. But they defeated him in such a nice way that he surrendered to Narottam Das Thakur. And he wrote many, or not many books, but two main books were Prarthana and Prema Bhakti Chandrika, which are filled with wonderful songs that were very, very dear to Srila Prabhupada. So his disappearance has part 1 and part 2. Even part 1 has 2 versions, but I like this version. He went to Narottam when he was quite old. He went to the house of Ganga Narayan Chakravarti, who was one of his Brahmin disciples. And he had a fever. And he was becoming weaker and weaker. Then he told his disciples to build a funeral fire that he was going to leave soon. So they put him on top of the pyre when he died, and the Brahmins, the smarta Brahmins, were saying things I can't repeat. It's in the book, but I can't repeat it. And Ganga Narayan and Ramchandra Kaviraj were so burned in their heart, they begged the Narottam that please come back and save them. And suddenly Narottam sat up on the funeral pyre, Radha Krishna Chaitanya, Radha Krishna Chaitanya, and a golden Brahman thread appeared on his chest, and those Brahmins immediately began, and they surrendered to Narottam and became his disciples. So that's disappearance part 1. Later, Narottam went to a place on the bank of the Ganga called Gambila, and one day he told all his disciples, we'll go to the Ganga. They took him down to the Ganga, and he said, now bathe me with the waters of the Ganga. And they began to pour the water of the Ganga over Narottam's body, and his body was melting away like milk, in the form of milk. And they were confused what to do. If we continue bathing, our spiritual master is going to disappear, but he's ordered us to bathe him. What can we do? And as they bathed, Narottam's body melted into the Jamuna as milk and flowed away. Luckily, someone had enough wits with him that he scooped up a bottle, and in Gambila there's a Dugdha Samadhi of Narottam Das Thakur. And Narottam Das Thakur, of course, at Gokulananda Mandir, where he got initiated by Lokanath Goswami, there's his Pushpa Samadhi is also there. So this is the wonderful life of Narottam Das Thakur. We hope you learned something new and became enlivened. So we'll meet you again tomorrow at this time, and we hope that you're all well. And our temple for 2 months now has been closed. There's no income whatsoever. So you please go to iskonvrindavan.com and find the donation link, and please give a donation to help us serve Krishna and Balaram. Thank you very much. How many people there?
Right now there were a lot. Right now there are 120, and Sitala Mataji is also watching.
Acha. Many of this information comes from Sitala Mataji's book. If you really want Narottam Das Thakur to become alive, you read Sitala Mataji's book.
120.
All right. Hare Krishna. We'll see you tomorrow.